Hey guys, it's me again, rocking a little mini bringing the funk for you once again. I'm gonna try something. Thought I'd have a little intro tune in my room by the Beach Boys. Of course, I felt that was a little appropriate since I'm filming from my bedroom once again. So, anyways, what have I got for you today? I'm going to do kind of a deep dive into some origin stories of some bands or some artists, and I think you might find some of these pretty surprising. I definitely didn't know that some of these artists had a very different path initially than what. They became later when they reached stardom. So first off, you probably know this chap by his stage name, but at the time, a young 18-year-old, he was known as Reginald Dwight. So I will try to play a little snippet of his group at the time, Bluesology.
Let's talk about Grammarly. The digital writing
Commercials, crap,
assistant more
one
than
sec here.
20 million people use to connect their
Bluesology, a little tune called "Come Back, Baby." So I think once he starts singing, you'll recognize it, but we'll see. All right, I don't know if anyone recognizes it, but that would be a young Sir Elton John. And he was working with these guys called Bluesology. They were doing a lot of R&B sounds that were quite popular in England at the time, and it wasn't really working for young Reginald there. I believe he referred to this song later years as absolutely dreadful, beyond dreadful. He wasn't a big fan of his early works, but he was quite a talented musician even at that point, I think. He had gotten started young, 3 years old and beyond. He could already play music from ear and started his classical training. He got a pretty sweet gig as a young teenager at a local hotel pub and was performing every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and that's where he really got his chops and started to hone his craft. And he started to after a couple line changes and differences of opinion. They added some saxophone, a little trumpet, and different things. It just wasn't working for young Dwight there. So he began working as a session musician. Did a number of recordings with the Hollies, and yeah, he eventually answered an ad from Liberty Records, a company in England at the time, and they hooked him up with a young poet by the name of Bernie Taupin. And of course, Bernie Taupin is like the powerhouse behind Sir Elton John. They that was like a marriage made in heaven, man. The two of them wrote some infamous tunes. I mean, most of the songs that you know by Elton John were written by Bernie Taupin, at least in part, and I believe they still work together. Including this little jam here. Great little jam. I always think of the Almost Famous scene when I hear this song, and someone having too much fun jumps off the roof into the pool. So anyway, that's kind of Elton's sort of history there. Quite a surprise, I think. All right, who are we going to next? Yes. I think most people will know this gentleman. I'll play something that you would know. First off, great song heard at karaoke bars everywhere, oftentimes getting butchered to some extent. This is, of course, Little Piano Man. Mr. Billy Joel. So, Billy has even said himself, most people probably think I just came into some piano bar, right? Not the case, man. He had a different direction initially. So I'll play a little snippet of one of his very first bands. Hard-working band in the mid-'60s. It's a little group called the Hassles. And yeah, they put out a number of LPs. Him and the drummer, John Small, not really wanted something else. And that's something else. They wanted to get heavy. They weren't sure how, but they wanted to bring the noise. And so they split from the band, late 60s, 1969, something like that. And they holed up in John Small's parents' store basement and just started working on stuff together. They brought in all kinds of Marshall stacks, and which is sort of the standard for loud rock music today. And they hooked them up to Billy Joel's Hammond organ, and Billy decided to purchase a wah-wah pedal, which normally you hear on guitar. If you don't know what a wah-wah pedal is, if you can think of Jimi Hendrix classic tune Voodoo Child, Slight Return, think of that intro, wow, 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 wow. That's like the epitome of the wah-wah sound. And, it was not by um, any fault of theirs, but they they produced just a bizarre sludge of kind of who could I compare it to? Iron Butterfly, maybe a little Led Zeppelin mixed in there. Not the Billy Joel that you know today, that's for sure. But they were determined they were going to take on the world and destroy it with audio. And they brought it to a manager at Epic Records and played some music for him. And he later went on record to say it was the worst crap I'd ever heard. But he managed to get them a $50,000 advance, and they laid down some recordings. So I will play a little snippet of that for you. This is early Billy Joel and John Small.
When I first saw this product, I thought it looked kind of crazy.
After the
Didn't
commercials,
really understand what the benefits would be, but I had seen.
Their tune called Wonder Woman. But certainly not the Billy Joel that we know now. Long shot from the Piano Man, yes? I was blown away by that one. That shocked me, and it shocked the audiences. They tried to play a few gigs, and people ran screaming. They were so loud. Maybe not the right crowd. They weren't ready for it. Their ears were bleeding. And yeah, the band kind of fizzled out. Billy Joel has gone on to say that he felt like it was a colossal failure, and behind the scenes, it turned out that young Billy was also having an affair with John Small's wife. so that didn't help anything. Oh, and I totally forgot to mention their name. That outfit was called Attila, as in Attila the Hun. They kind of went with that sort of robbing and plundering the world kind of motif there. They struggled to find a name. They went with Godzilla for a while. March of the Huns, my favorite brain invasion, but they settled on Attila. So that was Attila, early Billy Joel, rocking it, man. That's bizarre. And ultimately, his affair didn't help anything. The band split after beating the crap out of each other, um, and those two divorced. But she ended up marrying Billy later, and they eventually divorced. But years later, Billy Joel still had a fond place in his heart for that young woman, and still wrote songs to her or about her. She's always a woman to me, and just the way you are. We're both inspired by that young lass. Okay, this next one I found absolutely shocking. We're gonna get into early Madonna. I think uh, this one was probably the most kind of unexpected to me. I didn't know about Madonna's roots. I know her music. She's one of those people that has managed to reinvent herself repeatedly as things change and fashions move. So it shouldn't have really been a shock that early on she was trying to find herself and different things. So the story goes that she had arrived in New York late 1978, about 35 bucks in her pocket, and she pretty much survived on popcorn and donuts and maybe a little dumpster diving. You got to do what you got to do, right? Anyways, she was trying to make it dancing, and over time, her focus kind of shifted. She met a young man by the name of Dan Gilroy, who was a musician, playing in a band with his brother Ed. And they eventually moved in together in an abandoned synagogue of all places. So, in a part of Queens, New York, called Corona. Oh, uh-oh. Anyways, her man one day had open tuned a guitar so she could just strum it and it would sound good without her really knowing what she was doing. And something clicked. She's like, wow, this could work. I want to do this. So they started performing together. And this is interesting in itself, I think. Madonna was sat behind the drum kit and started hitting the skins. I didn't know she played drums ever, and provided vocals for this band. They ended up calling themselves the Breakfast Club. Uh, Several years before the movie, no relation. This name came from them performing or rehearsing all night long, and then they would go to this little Italian diner to get some sustenance afterwards, early in the morning, and they named themselves the Breakfast Club. So I'll play a little bit of that. I will tell you that at the time they were jamming and gigging at a famous club in New York back in the day called CBGB's. Now, if you don't know CBGB's, it's a now defunct bar, but that's where a lot of punk rock was being performed. So I think that informed their sound as well. And you'll hear this got this angsty kind of edgy stuff that I don't know. This blew my mind, man. This is early Madonna in the Breakfast Club. So I'll play a little snippet of that for you. 1979, man. This is weird, man. This blew my mind, man. Far from that polished pop artist that we know today, right? Wow. All right. So there you go. A little early Madonna in the Breakfast Club. That band eventually disbanded. The two, her and Dan Gilroy broke up. And, things were awkward, so she moved on to another group called Emmy and the Emmys. Kind of a crappy name, but I guess that was a nickname of hers. Was Emmy. Anyway, she moved out from behind the drums and became like the front woman, a la Pat Benatar. And I think that's where she got a taste of being in the spotlight and being the focus. And obviously, that she went on to do just that. And the drummer in that band, a man by the name of Steve Bray, continued to work with her long after that band had disbanded and helped her write a number of her big smash hits, Everybody, Into the Groove, and later on True Blue and Express Yourself. So, sorry, that was bad. I shouldn't do that. Yeah, there you go. Early Madonna and her punk rock days, man. Who knew, right? I don't know. I was shocked by that one. I don't know about you guys. This next one is just bizarre. So I'll have to give you a bit of backstory on what went down here, but I'll play a little snippet. This is a group called the Minabirds. And if you don't know who this is, I guarantee you'll probably not guess who's on vocals. Um, but I'll play a little bit for you. Of course. A couple seconds of commercial. Sorry. Okay, here we go. Minor Birds, a song called It's My Time. Circa mid 60s, anyways, like 64, 65. All right. I will tell you who that is. That's Rick James on the mic. Far cry from his Super Freak days. This was, like I mentioned, early 60s, late 60s. And not only was that Rick James, but Neil Young on guitar. Yeah, man. So, how the heck did these guys get together? Well, 1964, August, a young James Johnson was Rick James' birth name, was called up in the draft. And he did not want to go. He wasn't doing it. So he flew up to Canada and was going to hide out in Toronto. And just shortly after arriving, he got jumped by a bunch of gang members. And who came to his rescue but two young lads, one Levon Helm and Garth Hudson of the group The Band. So these fellas struck up a friendship with him and introduced Rick to the Toronto music scene. And he adopted the name Ricky James Matthews just to sort of help him hide from the authorities, if you will. And he eventually joined a band with the horrible name, the Sailor Boys. And they would change to an equally exciting name, the Minor Birds, which you heard there. And they played kind of a fusion of soul and folk rock. Tons of line changes. Nick St. Nicholas, later of Steppenwolf, joined them. And then later Bruce Palmer of Buffalo Springfield fame. So Neil and James hit it off and became roommates. And the story goes that the two of them pretty much sustained themselves by ripping off, well, I think it was Rick James mostly, ripped off early morning delivery trucks, and that's how they got their food to eat for the day. Yeah, later on, Rick wrote fondly of Neil in his memoir, and he said his singing was a little strange, but his facility on the guitar was crazy. Neil spoke of Rick years later, saying, he was a bit touchy, dominating, but a good guy. He had a lot of talent, and he really wanted to make it bad. And that is so true. So by 66, those dudes had signed for with Motown Records, which I'm sure everyone knows, and headed up to the legendary Hitsville studio in Detroit. So they quickly had to be enrolled in what they called their finishing school to learn how to be cool, choreography and etiquette. Neil says that they didn't do so well with that stuff. None of them were good at being fit into a mold, that's for sure. But they managed to record 4 songs and planned to make a full-length album. But during that time, they fired their manager for some shady business, some kind of financial improprieties. And, well, the manager tried to get back at them by reporting Rick to the authorities. And as a military deserter, James went to the Slammer. And yeah, the band disbanded, and Neil and Palmer bought a hearse and cruised down to LA, and that's where they formed Buffalo Springfield. Took James about 5 months to get released, and it would be a long time before we heard any Super Freak from the man. Also, as a liner note, I guess, as I mentioned, he had adopted the name Ricky James Matthews, and upon first going to Hitsville Studios, they got to meet one of their idols, none other than Stevie Wonder. And Stevie asked what his name was and said, "Man, Ricky James Matthews, that's too long, man. Just make it Ricky James." So, yeah, so that's where the name came from, anyways. And I apologize for my Mr. Stevie Wonder there. I got nothing but love for that man. He's great. One of the greatest songwriters of all time, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, I got one more for you guys, and then I'll have to split. I'm going to play a little bit of this first, and then we'll get into who this is and what they became. This is Rick and the Ravens. So low down you could die. Well, come on with rain now, people. I'm gonna take you on a little ride. And now come on, everybody, let's take a little trip. Alright, so that was their jam Soul Train. No relation to the red, but so if you don't know, that was Ray Manzarek of the Doors, the keyboardist on the Doors, singing there under the title of Screamin' Ray Daniels. And him, along with 2 brothers, played in this group called Rick and the Ravens. And the story goes that they were playing this dive called the Turkey Joint often, and one of Ray's classmates at UCLA would often be there, running amok, all kinds of shenanigans, already a belligerent guy yelling from the back constantly, and that was none other than Mr. Jim Morrison. And he would always yell out requests, and Ray had said, "Man, you could always hear this guy barking from the background." So one night, he was yelling out, "Louie, Louie!" He wanted them to play Louie, Louie often. That was his request. And Ray decided to get back at his drunken friend, and he said, "Hey, how about you come up on stage and help us out and sing a little Louie, Louie for the crowd?" And Jim had never sung for people ever before, but he wasn't going to back down. He got up there on stage and let out one of his signature blood-curdling screams, and they jumped into it. And as Ray Manzarek has said, the crowd went bananas, and they loved it, and so did Jim. He was dancing all over the stage and sang himself completely hoarse. So it was a fun night for everyone, but it appeared that that would be just a kind of one-off kind of thing until, long after that, Jim and Ray just happened to run into each other down in Venice Beach. And after talking for a bit, Jim mentioned that he had been writing some songs, some lyrics, and after a little coaxing, he sang a couple lines for Ray, and Ray was like, "Man, that's wild. We gotta get a band together," and so they did. And of course, I think most people know the Doors. I'm gonna play a little snippet of their action, appropriately titled "The End," because this is the end of my little deep dive into some origins of rock stars there. I think most of you know the Doors, of course. Quite a unique sound. I think that only came out of the fact that all those musicians, Robbie Krieger, John Densmore, Ray Manzarek, and Jim Morrison, all had a weird mixed match of influences, everything from Latin America to Eastern philosophy to you name it. So with The End playing me out, that's the end of my Bringing the Funk for this week. Had a couple of tech Ds, so I'm sorry for the delay, but I will do another shout out to you guys next week, I hope. Hope you're all keeping safe and doing good. I miss you all greatly. Take care, everyone.